Let's rewind the clock way back before San Francisco. Before the gold, before the power. Somewhere around 1814, a baby girl was born into a world built to erase her. Her name was Mary Ellen. The records don't agree on where some say Georgia. Some say Virginia because the world didn't think her life was worth remembering. But history was wrong. Mary Ellen Pleasant was born into slavery, or, depending on the source, an indentured child who still had no control over her own life. But from the very start, she showed something that couldn't be chained: awareness. She watched, she listened, she learned. And even as a child, she understood something most people never figure out, that freedom starts in the mind long before it shows up on paper. By her teens, Mary Ellen was sent north, possibly as a domestic worker for a wealthy family in Massachusetts. The details are fuzzy because records of black women in that era were barely kept. But one thing's for sure, that move changed everything. In the North, she saw a different kind of world. People openly debated slavery, some defending it, some fighting against it. She listened to those conversations while serving dinner, washing dishes, and sweeping the floors. And she started absorbing the strategies of abolitionists like other people absorb gossip. She was learning how the system worked, not to accept it, but to beat it. Eventually, she met a man named James Smith, a wealthy, well-connected abolitionist. He wasn't just talk, he put his money where his mouth was. He and Mary Ellen married, forming one of the most unlikely power couples of the 80s. Together, they became part of the Underground Railroad, the secret network that smuggled enslaved people to freedom. They opened their home, used their finances, and risked their lives. And though James was the man with money, Mary Ellen was the one with courage. Imagine this: cold nights, lanterns dimmed, frightened families huddled in carriages. Mary Ellen Pleasant guiding them north, calm, strategic, fearless. The Underground Railroad wasn't a train, and it wasn't underground. It was a network of people, safe houses, and signals, and it was illegal. Every journey risked prison or death. But Mary Ellen never flinched. Some historians even believe she used disguises and fake papers to help hundreds escape, blending into high society circles to gather information on slave catchers and bounty hunters. She wasn't just running from the system, she was learning how to outthink it. When James Smith died, Mary Ellen was heartbroken, but she inherited more than his estate. She inherited his mission and, more importantly, his financial leverage. It wasn't a fortune by the standards of the elite, but for a black woman in the 1840s, it was power. And she knew exactly how to use it. Mary Ellen could have stayed safe in Boston, living quietly, maybe even comfortable. But that wasn't her. She wanted more, not for greed, but for purpose. She understood something that few abolitionists did, that economic power was the key to freedom. So when whispers of opportunity came from the West, a place where identities could be rewritten and fortunes made overnight, she packed what she had, gathered her nerve, and took a leap that would change history. In 1852, Mary Ellen Pleasant boarded a ship bound for San Francisco, disguised as a domestic servant accompanying a white woman. She left the familiar behind and stepped into a chaotic, unpredictable city bursting with gold, fever, corruption, and raw ambition. What no one knew was that this quiet maid was about to become one of the most powerful women the West had ever seen. She had survived slavery, she had learned the systems of power, and now she was ready to play the game and win. It's the year 1852. The air in San Francisco is thick with smoke, dust, and ambition. You can smell the salt water and the sweat of men chasing fortune. Ships are docked so tightly, you could walk across the bay without touching water. The city is chaos, part paradise, part madness, and it's the perfect place for reinvention. Mary Ellen Pleasant steps off a ship from the East Coast, dressed as a servant. To anyone watching, she's just another worker following a wealthy white woman through the harbor crowd. But what they don't know is that the servant is the one holding the plan. California in the 1850s wasn't exactly a welcoming place for black people. The state had joined the Union as free, but the reality was ugly discrimination, violence, and laws that treated black residents as second-class citizens. Even in the so-called land of opportunity, Mary Ellen had to move carefully. So she blended in. She played the part of the quiet maid, listening while others talked about mining deals, shipping contracts, political gossip, and who controlled the city's real money. That's when Mary Ellen discovered something powerful. In San Francisco, information was worth more than gold. At first, she worked small jobs, running boarding houses and kitchens for working men. But these weren't ordinary boarding houses. They were her laboratory. She'd cook for city officials, merchants, bankers, and their employees, listening to every word. She remembered names, numbers, habits, weaknesses. People talked freely around a woman they thought didn't matter. But she was taking notes, and those notes would become her empire. Mary Ellen Pleasant's strategy was genius-level social engineering. She'd identify who was rising fast, who owed who money, and who could be influenced. When opportunity struck, she quietly invested. A few dollars here, a partnership there. She'd lend money to miners or businessmen and take a silent cut of their profits. Most didn't even realize their success was tied to it. But Mary Ellen wasn't just chasing wealth, she was building security. In a world where a single rumor could destroy a black woman's livelihood, she needed to control her destiny. And the only way to do that was through ownership. She opened laundries, invested in restaurants, and bought property under discreet arrangements. She partnered with other African Americans who were locked out of white-controlled markets, giving them jobs, homes, and dignity in a city that offered none. Her operations expanded like invisible roots beneath the city. She didn't flaunt her success, she moved in silence. But make no mistake, she was watching everything. In just a few years, she transformed from a quiet domestic worker into a silent financial force. Her name didn't appear in newspapers. Her face wasn't painted in portraits, but behind closed doors, her influence reached every major circle of power. It wasn't long before she caught the attention of San Francisco's elite. Some saw her as a charming hostess, others as an enigma, and when whispers began about her wealth, people started to wonder, who was Mary Ellen Pleasant, really? Rumors spread fast. Some said she had secret lovers among city politicians. Others said she practiced voodoo and used magic to control men. But those stories said more about racism and fear than about truth, because the truth was much simpler and far more impressive. Mary Ellen Pleasant didn't cast spells. She studied people. She mastered psychology before anyone called it that. She understood power, how it moved, who had it, and how to make it work for her. And then she made her boldest move yet. She joined forces with a man named Thomas Bell, a white, Scottish banker and investor with a reputation for risky deals and deep pockets. On paper, Bell looked like the brains of their operation. But insiders knew the truth. Mary Ellen Pleasant was the strategist. Bell provided the name. Pleasant provided the plan. Together, they built one of the most powerful financial partnerships in California. They bought real estate, invested in railroads, and quietly amassed a fortune that, in today's money, would be worth tens of millions. Their empire grew so vast that by the late 1850s, the mansion they shared on Octavia Street became a local legend, a towering symbol of wealth and mystery. People whispered about what went on behind those walls. More powerful, a black woman, who had built her empire in plain sight and outplayed a city that didn't even believe she had the right to exist. Mary Ellen Pleasant found it in people, their vices, their ambitions, their secrets. She turned information into income and respect into control. By the end of the 1850s, she was no longer the servant from the ship. She was the hidden architect of San Francisco's high society. a woman with more influence than most politicians. But she still had unfinished business. Because for Mary Ellen Pleasant, money was never the end game. Freedom was. Her wealth gave her access. Her access gave her voice. And now, she was ready to use that voice to challenge California's racist laws head-on. By the late 1850s, Mary Ellen Pleasant was no longer just a quiet woman working behind the scenes. She was a force. She had money, strategy, and connections. But she had to be invisible, at least publicly. In a city that refused to acknowledge her worth, secrecy was power. Pleasant's first ventures were modest: laundries, boarding houses, and catering operations. But she had an eye for scale. She treated every business as a chessboard, every employee, every client, every landlord a potential piece in her strategy. It wasn't long before she began quietly investing her earnings. She bought property through trusted intermediaries, often under the names of white allies or silent partners. This allowed her to sidestep California's discriminatory laws, which could have blocked her from owning land or businesses outright. Then came Thomas Bell, a Scottish banker known for his daring deals and connections. Most people assumed he was the brains behind their partnership. But in truth, Mary Ellen Pleasant was the strategist, the one who spotted opportunities Bell didn't even know existed. Together, they bought houses, land, and commercial properties across San Francisco. They invested in shipping, railroads, and emerging industries. Every venture was calculated, often secret, always profitable. Pleasant learned to use Bell's social standing to gain credibility while keeping her own role deliberately hidden. But it wasn't just about money. Pleasant understood power on a deeper level: social, political, and psychological. She made connections with key politicians, merchants, and community leaders, often hosting dinners and gatherings in her boarding houses. People came to talk, to negotiate, to scheme, and she listened. She remembered, she acted, she turned gossip into intelligence. She turned influence into leverage. And slowly, San Francisco's elite began to realize something strange. This black woman, who publicly seemed small, quiet, at the same time, Pleasant didn't lose sight of her roots. She used her wealth to support African American communities. She provided jobs, housing, and financial guidance to black entrepreneurs and families shut out of the city's mainstream economy. And she did it all while remaining largely invisible to white society. Her growing empire attracted attention, not always good attention. Rumors began to swirl. Some called her a voodoo queen, a witch, or a manipulator. Racism and sexism fueled these myths. But beneath the whispers, she continued to build, strategize, and expand. And while some feared her, others sought her favor. She could sway contracts, marriages, and city politics, all from behind the veil of propriety. By the early 1860s, Mary Ellen Pleasant's influence was undeniable. She had become a financial powerhouse and a social strategist, operating in a city that did not officially recognize her existence. She had learned to turn invisibility into armor, strategy into empire, and secrecy into power. Her mansion on Octavia Street became legendary. Inside, she held meetings, plotted investments, and advised allies. Outside, the public knew her as a wealthy woman of mystery, someone who could not be fully understood, and thus not fully challenged. Pleasant's empire was not just about profit, it was about leverage. Every property, every loan, every relationship added to her ability to influence the city, and she was just getting started. By the mid-1860s, Mary Ellen Pleasant had transformed San Francisco's perception of what a black woman could achieve. And she hadn't done it by being loud. She hadn't done it by demanding recognition. She did it by mastering the rules of the city, the people, the money, and the secrets, and playing the game better than anyone else. But money and influence were only tools. Pleasant had a larger mission: justice, and her next moves would take her from quiet power into the courts, into the streets, and into the history books as one of the earliest civil rights activists in the West. By the 1860s, Mary Ellen Pleasant had built wealth, influence, and a network that most people couldn't even imagine. But money was only the beginning. Her true mission was justice, and in San Francisco, that meant using her empire to challenge the rules that kept Black Californians oppressed. Pleasant's first moves into civil rights were quiet but deliberate. She provided financial support for lawsuits challenging discriminatory practices, like the streetcar segregation law. Black residents were being denied equal access to public transportation, a fundamental restriction on daily life. Mary Ellen funded their cases and connected them with lawyers willing to fight the system. She was meticulous. She understood that the law could be manipulated, but only if you had the right people, the money to back her, and the courage to act, and she had all three. Pleasant's influence extended beyond the courts. She was rumored to have contributed financially to John Brown's raid, the famous attempt to start a rebellion against slavery in 1859, while historians debate the full extent of her involvement. Letters and oral histories suggest she was quietly supporting abolitionists nationwide, connecting California's resources to the larger fight for freedom. But Mary Ellen's power wasn't just in the courtroom or in financial support. It was in her ability to shape public opinion. She moved among San Francisco's elite city officials, merchants, bankers, gaining influence without ever overtly confronting them. Her empire of boarding houses, laundries, and restaurants became information hubs. What people said in her presence, thinking she was just a servant or hostess, could end up reshaping the city's political or economic decisions. Her civil rights work was subtle but effective. She empowered the Black community, funded education and businesses, and helped families navigate the city's discriminatory laws. And all of this while keeping her own name largely out of the headlines, because she understood the danger of visibility in a racist, male-dominated society. Of course, her success didn't go unnoticed. As her influence grew, so did rumors. Newspapers began portraying her as mysterious, dangerous, even supernatural, a so-called voodoo queen who could control men and money with dark magic. These rumors were fueled by racism and fear, but they also made Mary Ellen more powerful. People were cautious around her, and that caution gave her leverage. She learned to use society's assumptions about race and gender to her advantage. While the city whispered, she acted. While they feared her, she invested, built alliances, and orchestrated justice from behind the scenes. By the 1860s, Mary Ellen Pleasant was not just wealthy, she was powerful in a way few could understand. She had a network of allies, a fortune to leverage, and a mind attuned to the social and political currents of her time. And she used all of it to fight for a cause bigger than herself: equality, justice, and opportunity for African Americans in California. Her power, however, came with a cost. Operating in secrecy, she faced suspicion from both white elites and some within her own community. Her methods: financial manipulation, discreet alliances, and strategic secrecy were misunderstood, misrepresented, and often attacked. And that tension would only grow as the next chapter of her life unfolded. Mary Ellen Pleasant had become a legend in her own time, a woman whose genius lay in turning society's blind spots into tools for justice. And yet, the world was not done testing her. By the 1890s, the empire Mary Ellen Pleasant had built was gone. The grand mansion on Octavia Street, once filled with laughter, strategy, and secrets, stood quiet. Her investments had been seized or scattered through years of court battles and betrayal. San Francisco, the city she helped shape, moved on without her. But even stripped of wealth, Mary Ellen remained defiant. She never renounced who she was or what she stood for. In In her later years, she lived modestly with friends and supporters, still respected by many in San Francisco's black community, still feared by those who misunderstood her. Her enemies called her bitter. Her allies called her brave, but those who knew her best said she was tired, not broken. Just tired of fighting a world that had tried to erase her at every turn. Mary Ellen Pleasant died in 1904. She left behind a legacy shrouded in rumor but built on fact. She had been an abolitionist, a financier, and a strategist decades ahead of her time. When she passed, newspapers wrote half-truths and speculation. Some called her rich, others claimed she died penniless. But what's certain is this: her impact never truly disappeared. For nearly a century, her story was buried beneath gossip and misrepresentation. She was written off as a curiosity, a mysterious figure who somehow rose too high. But then, historians began looking closer. They found court records, property deeds, letters, and testimony. And when the pieces were put together, a new picture emerged, not of a witch, but of a woman who used intelligence, stealth, and economic power to fight for equality long before the civil rights movement even had a name. Today, Mary Ellen Pleasant is often called the mother of civil rights in California. Long before Rosa Parks, before the NAACP, she took on segregation in public spaces and won. She funded freedom movements, she empowered her community, and she did it all while living in a world that didn't even see her as fully human. Her story forces us to rethink what power really looks like. It isn't always loud. It isn't always recognized. Sometimes, it's a woman moving quietly through a city, building empires in the shadows, and waiting for history to catch up. Mary Ellen Pleasant. His name is now remembered alongside the great figures of American history, not because she asked for recognition, but because her work demanded it. Her mansion may be gone, but her legacy stands in every court victory. Every entrepreneur who fights to be seen, every activist who refuses to back down. In words once attributed to her, "I don't look for stones to throw, I look for steps to climb." Mary Ellen Pleasant climbed every step the world said she couldn't take, from slavery to freedom, from servant to mogul, from invisibility to immortality. Her life was proof that power doesn't need permission. It only needs purpose. I'm your narrator, and this was the story of Mary Ellen Pleasant, the woman who outsmarted San Francisco. By the 1870s, Mary Ellen Pleasant was a name whispered with equal parts respect and fear. She had done the impossible, built wealth, influence, and social reach as a black woman in a post-gold rush world that refused to see her as an equal. But San Francisco's high society was growing uncomfortable. She wasn't just successful, she was powerful. And in America, a powerful black woman was something the establishment couldn't tolerate quietly. At the center of the growing tension was her partnership with Thomas Bell, the wealthy Scottish banker she had built her fortune with. Together, they owned dozens of properties, businesses, and investments. Their partnership blurred the lines between business, friendship, and rumor. Bell's mansion on Octavia Street, where Mary Ellen also lived, became a subject of fascination and scandal. The press, driven by racism and misogyny, painted her as a manipulator, a woman who had cast some kind of spell over Bell. They called her a sorceress, a seductress, a voodoo queen. The stories sold papers, and they destroyed reputations. One headline read, "The Black Madam of Mystery." Others called her Mammy Pleasant, twisting her name into mockery. She despised the term. It was the press' way of putting her back into a box, turning her genius into caricature, her power into suspicion. But behind the headlines, the truth was simple. Mary Ellen Pleasant was the financial mind of the operation. Her business sense and connections made both her and Bell rich. Yet when Bell died suddenly in 1892, everything changed. Almost immediately, Bell's family accused her of manipulation and deceit. They claimed she had taken advantage of him, stolen his fortune, and bewitched his judgment. In court, they painted her as a dangerous woman, one who used trickery, race, and alleged magic to gain power. The truth was never fully known. But what is clear is that Mary Ellen lost control of much of her wealth in the legal chaos that followed. Years of empire building unraveled under the weight of scandal, bias, and betrayal. For the city's elite, the trial was more than a legal battle, it was revenge. Pleasant had humiliated them simply by existing as her equal. Now they sought to erase her legacy, to make her a lesson rather than a legend. But Mary Ellen Pleasant didn't go quietly. Even as her name was dragged through the press, she stood firm. She testified with composure, intelligence, and unflinching dignity. "I'd rather be a corpse than a coward," she once said. As the lawsuits dragged on, her fortune dwindled. The Octavia Street mansion was taken from her. Friends turned away, but the legend of her power only grew. Some said she haunted the mansion. Others claimed her spirit controlled the city's wealth long after her death. The truth: she had built something too complex to kill, a legacy of influence, entrepreneurship, and resistance. The irony was cruel. The same newspapers that demonized her in life turned her into folklore in death. Her name became myth, part truth, part rumor, part ghost story. But beneath the layers of scandal, the reality was extraordinary. Mary Ellen Pleasant had outplayed the system for decades, and she had done it in plain sight. Even after losing her wealth, she continued fighting for civil rights and equality. She filed one of the first lawsuits in California challenging racial discrimination on public transportation and won. The case, Pleasant v. North Beach and Mission Railroad Company, set a precedent that echoed for generations. By the end of her life, Mary Ellen Pleasant had been called many things: a witch, a millionaire, a visionary, a criminal, a saint. The truth was all of it and none of it. She was a woman who refused to accept limits, who used the tools she had: intellect, wealth, and strategy to build a life beyond imagination. But history, written by those she threatened, tried to bury her story, and that's exactly why it must be told. In every era, there are people who change the rules, not by asking for permission, but by proving what's possible. Mary Ellen Pleasant was one of those people. From the shadows of slavery to the height of power in the American West. She played a game no one thought she could win, and she won it over and over again. She used intelligence as her weapon, compassion as her strategy, and secrecy as her shield. She understood that freedom wasn't given, it had to be built. Piece by piece, investment by investment, fight by fight. Today, her mansion is gone. Her name still half forgotten by history books. But her influence lives in every entrepreneur who breaks barriers, every activist who demands equality, every woman who refuses to be told what she can't do. Mary Ellen Pleasant wasn't just a businesswoman. She was a visionary, a strategist of freedom, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful revolutions happen quietly, in the hands of those the world underestimates. This was the story of Mary Ellen Pleasant, the woman who outsmarted San Francisco and changed the future one secret at a time. History is full of people like Mary Ellen Pleasant, powerful, brilliant, and buried beneath silence. If you believe stories like hers deserve to be told, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more untold chapters of American history. Because the past isn't gone, it's waiting to be remembered.